afternoon. My name is Sarah Morgan Sylvester, and I am proud to be the Chancellor of this great institution, the University of British Columbia. I'd like to welcome you this afternoon and thank you so much for making the time to reflect on the past and help plan the future with an update on UBC's strategic plan called Place and Promise. UBC belongs in the category of great universities. From its earliest days, it's attracted gifted and outstanding students, faculty, and staff, given them the tools to forge their own success in an atmosphere of civic responsibility and concern for the well-being of others. UBC is doing important work, and that's why I volunteer my time as Chancellor. UBC is a place of mind, a place of growth and optimism, and surely located in one of the most beautiful places in the world. I am so impressed by the work being done on this campus, by the expansion of our facilities, and by the enthusiasm with which students, faculty, and staff are embracing the promise of the future. UBC is actively showing how open minds can change the world, locally, nationally, and internationally. What happens on this campus has an impact across the globe. For example, UBC's Don Mavinik was formally recognized in the BC Provincial Legislature as one of 6 BC finalists in the Manning Innovation Awards competition for 2010. Don and his research team were nominated for their innovative and now globally applied technology in recovering nutrients, primarily phosphorus, from wastewater. The nutrient recovery forms a fertilizer known as crystal green. Well, this is pretty great stuff, turning a pollutant into something beneficial. But UBC is full of brilliant and ambitious people with an innate curiosity whose expertise spans a vast academic spectrum. Just last week, 6 UBC professors were elected as new fellows by the Royal Society of Canada for 2010. As you may know, the Royal Society of Canada consists of nearly 2,000 fellows, men and women, who are selected by their peers for outstanding contributions to the natural and social sciences, in the arts, and in the humanities. If that wasn't enough, 4 UBC affiliates received the Order of British Columbia, one of whom was Dr. Mark O'Mara. Dr. Mara continues to raise the bar of research excellence by establishing the technology for a next-generation DNA sequencing platform, a powerful tool in the understanding of cancer genomics and the mountain pine beetle epidemic. As for our students, 10 students from UBC's Graduate School of Journalism's International Reporting class, led by former 60 Minutes producer and UBC Associate Professor Peter Klein, have been nominated for 2 Emmy Awards. This is the first time students at a Canadian university have been nominated for an Emmy in the news category. And all that is done on this campus would not be possible without great staff who take pride in contributing to the institution's excellence by enhancing the UBC experience for our students, providing leadership and creativity in managing the campus, helping define global citizenship, and offering the very best in customer service. This is a story about an institution open to trying something different, an institution that is leading the way. UBC is indeed a place of mind. And now I'm very pleased to introduce you to the internal Vice Chair of the Board of Governors, Dr. Andrew Irvine. Andrew chairs the Property and Planning Committee of the board while participating in a number of other committees. Andrew is a professor in the Department of Philosophy at UBC, active in both local and national community organizations. Andrew serves on several academic advisory boards and on the boards of directors of several charitable organizations. He's also a founding member of the editorial board of the online reference work, the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and is both a Killam Fellow and a Commonwealth Scholar. Andrew's been included on the Vancouver Sun's list of British Columbia's top 50 living public intellectuals. We are very fortunate to have Andrew at the board. Thank you, Andrew, for your leadership on the board and for all your contributions to our discussions, for helping us make those really important decisions that will have a lasting impact on the future of our university. I'll welcome Dr. Andrew Irvine to the podium. Almost said to the stand.
Well, thank you, Chancellor, and thank you, everyone. I thought you were talking about my father for a while. On behalf of the Board of Governors, it's my genuine pleasure to welcome everyone here today, not only to today's town hall meeting, but also to a new academic year. It's a year that promises to be exciting and stimulating in this place of mind, UBC. Excellent post-secondary education can't be achieved without numerous partnerships. It involves a major investment by government, increasingly by the private sector, and also by students, often together with their parents. UBC's Board of Governors is responsible, among other things, for the management of the university's business affairs. The board ensures that funds entrusted to the university are invested and spent judiciously, and with the long-term health of the university always in mind. This stewardship is particularly important in times of economic uncertainty. I'm happy to add that the board has had an excellent year, working closely with Professor Toop, the vice presidents, and the rest of the administration. Together, members of the board have one clear goal: to serve the university to the very best of our ability. Although members bring to the board the views of their various constituencies, faculty, students, staff, alumni, the larger community, it's a genuine pleasure to be able to report to you that in my experience, everyone who's had the privilege of serving on the board has worked to make decisions on behalf of the university as a whole and in support of UBC's mission to be a world-renowned institution of higher education and research. And now, I'm very pleased to introduce you to the president of the university, Professor Stephen Toop. Professor Toop was named the 12th president and vice chancellor in March of 2006, and I personally am delighted that he'll begin his second 5-year term in July of 2011. He's an international law scholar whose academic interests include public international law, legal theory, human rights, international dispute resolution, family law, and more recently, I hear, slam poetry. But I'll let him speak for himself. Thank you very much, everyone, and welcome, Professor Toop.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Students, colleagues, friends of UBC, alumni, and everyone watching over the internet. I have to take a moment to thank the Chancellor and to thank the members of the Board of Governors for their remarkable dedication to the university. I've been privileged to sit as a member of various boards over the years, and I can't think of any group that I've ever worked with that has a stronger sense of purpose, a stronger sense of commitment to our collective endeavor than does our Board of Governors. It's truly a remarkable collection of volunteers who are doing this because they think that what we do at UBC matters. So I want to take a moment to say thank you to the Chancellor for her outstanding leadership and to all of the members of the board. Please join me in thanking them. I'd especially like to welcome the president of the Alma Mater Society, Bijan Ahmadian, who's here with us, and members of the executive of the university, Dr. David Farrar, Provost, Ms. Barbara Miles, VP Development and Alumni Engagement, Mr. Stephen Owen, VP External, Legal and Community Engagement, Mr. Pierre Ouillet, VP Finance, Resources and Operations, Mr. Brian Sullivan, VP Students, Ms. Lisa Castle, AVP Human Resources, and Mr. Hubert Lai, University Counsel. John Hepburn is traveling and can't be with us. I also have to say that I am blessed to be able to work with colleagues who I admire, trust, and learn from every day, and I want to take a moment to say thank you to all of the members of the executive for your incredibly hard work. Thank you very much. You'll recall that last year the format of the annual general meeting was changed to provide the UBC community with more of an opportunity to engage directly, to ask questions, and be part of a dialogue. We will have an opportunity to bring forward achievements at the Blue and Gold Review, which will take place on November 29th. And this year, for the first time in light of our sustainability goals, the university's annual report is going to be in an online format only for the external community. But we'll make sure that you know about that annual report when it's uploaded. I'd also like to take a moment to welcome all of our alumni, including faculty and staff who've graduated from UBC. We really depend upon your support in so many ways, and I'm very grateful to see alumni coming out to support the university. As Andrew Irvine mentioned, I did accept a renewal of my term, a new 5-year appointment, and a number of people have asked me why. And I thought that might be a very good way to start my overview of Place and Promise, the UBC plan. And when they ask why, I think it's because people look around the world and they see that universities are in a somewhat tough position globally. They look at all of the challenges that face every major social institution today, and they wonder why people are willing to take on roles of leadership. And I think that the answer is simple, because these are remarkable jobs that allow one to truly make a difference to our community. And that's a huge privilege to have that ability to make a difference for our community. I do want to tell you that I think UBC is now positioned to be a resource, and a strong resource, not just for the local community and for the province of British Columbia, but for all of Canada. And I firmly believe that UBC can, over the next decade or so, establish itself firmly as the university in Canada that has the greatest global influence. And I think that's something that we should all collectively take great pride in, because this doesn't happen through leadership. It happens through the work of a huge number of people, students, faculty, staff, and alumni who want to strengthen UBC. And so I feel very privileged to have another opportunity over the next number of years to continue working for the strengthening of UBC. And the starting point for that for me is, of course, Place and Promise, the UBC plan, and the vision statement, which really tells us clearly why UBC has the opportunity to be an important globally influential university. I think it's because we have clearly established that the university knows where it's going and has the means of getting there. The plan was launched in 2009, you'll remember, and it really resulted from very wide consultation. Obviously, having the opportunity to engage over the web allowed thousands of people from UBC, of all of the different communities that are part of this university, to engage in the planning that resulted in Place and Promise. I would ask you to take a look at the Strategic Plan website, if you've not done so recently, to remind yourself of what it is that we've collectively as a community said that we want to accomplish. There are, of course, 3 core commitments to student learning, research, excellence, and community engagement, and they are buttressed by 6 areas of emphasis where I think UBC has a particular ability to do globally significant things that actually speak to our values as an institution over the next few years. So the plan, to me, is absolutely critical to UBC's future success, and I hope that it will continue to drive, as it has so far, some coordinated planning processes across both of our campuses. I'm also very happy to say that we've worked hard over the last year to fulfill a promise that I made to you and to the whole community, which was that we were going to do our very best to link together the planning process and the university's budget. And so we've made great strides in that regard, and I want to thank the deans, and I want to thank the vice presidents, and many others across the university who've made that possible. What it means is that it becomes an available object for us to actually coordinate ourselves and to actually try to seize all of the different initiatives and somehow aggregate them to make more of a difference in the world. Now, we have reported for the first number of months of the plan. That was released in July 2010, and you'll see the first annual report at the Strategic Plan website, which shows the high-level goals and actions and reports on some of the stories that speak to the plan's 9 commitments. And we're going to expand and refine that report over the next number of years. So if you have any suggestions about how that plan, how the report could be made more useful for you as a member of our community, please let me know, because the goal here is truly to be accountable as a community for the promises that we've made ourselves. The strategic plan is ourselves as a community speaking about our future. And so I want to make sure that we continue to challenge ourselves to ensure that we're actually delivering on what we said we were going to do. And so I'd like to, in this first report on Place and Promise at an annual meeting, speak to some of the initiatives and challenges under each of the commitments. And I encourage you to go online to see much more detail. So student learning is clearly at the very heart of the strategic plan. And we're trying very hard, and many people are working to enhance the student learning experience both at the undergraduate and graduate level. You've heard lots about the Carl Wyman Science Education Initiative, but I want to emphasize something new this year. We now have 7 departments working actively through the Carl Wyman Initiative. 26 specific faculty members involved, 24 courses already transformed. And this affects literally thousands of students who I think are now being given a much greater opportunity to truly engage in their science education. But our initiatives are much broader than that. The Teaching and Learning Enhancement Fund, for example, saw 48 projects funded last year with over $2 million approved to help people with their own ideas across the university improve that student experience. This included, for example, support for a multimedia website on First Nations history and instructional skills training for international teaching assistants, which is one of the things that I hear a lot about from our undergraduates, that this is an important initiative for the university. Now, you probably know that Carl Wyman himself is on leave this year, taking an important post in the White House, but the program continues in full force with Sarah Gilbert as acting director, and we're looking forward to Carl's return. Over 25,000 students at UBC Vancouver received merit and needs-based support last year, totaling $200 million. UBC is committed to expanding opportunities for all of our undergraduate students to participate in enriched learning experiences. One of the commitments in the student learning portion of Place and Promise is that every student will have at least 2 enriched educational opportunities in addition to their classroom experiences. That can include international community service learning, co-op, small class experiences, research experiences. And let me just give you an example from the Vancouver campus. Civil Engineering 201 and 202, the students there work with community organizations to find real solutions like a solar-powered pump to ensure fresh water for grazing cows while protecting riparian ecosystems. So very pragmatic opportunities for students to engage in research work that speaks directly to a felt community need. Student life is central to the whole educational experience, and we're trying to create more and more spaces where students can self-organize and actually generate their own engagement. One example is the Simon K.Y. Lee Global Lounge, developed last year. Commitment was made by our Board of Governors over the last year, a very dramatic commitment, to commit to increase by 2,500 our residence spaces by 2015. That's 2,500 new residence spaces in Vancouver. We already have by far the largest residence provision of any university in Canada, but we need to bolster that to allow more students the wonderful opportunity to live on campus. As you well know, the green light has been given to the new Student Union building, and we're partnering with the AMS and GSS to make that an exciting space. Students are driving that project, and I can't wait to be at the opening. I also want to mention a very important development over the last year, the creation of Cultivating Place, the South Campus Academic Plan, which includes the 24-hectare UBC farm. This plan was approved after the board invited the academic community to create an academically rigorous and globally significant plan for the South Campus. We've done that, and we will be further protecting the farm over the course of the next few months, and I'll have more to say about that. On research excellence, well, I do want to point out that there was a structural change this year. I asked John Hepburn to take over the international portfolio in addition to being a research VP, and this will, I think, provide strategic emphasis in promoting international research collaboration as well as graduate student mobility, which I think is one of the most important ways that universities can connect across cultures and regions. UBC last year received more than $549 million from external sources in research funding, 7,700 projects. This reflects incredible work done by colleagues across UBC. It's an amazing statistic. Fully 60% of all of the research done in British Columbia is done at UBC, 60%. By way of comparison, the entire University of California system produces about 20% of California's research. Now, that speaks to a problem, which is that we don't have enough good research taking place in industry, but it also speaks to the enormous importance of UBC to the BC economy and society of the future. We host 2 of the 3 new networks of centers of excellence announced in 2009. Of course, a new Canada Excellence Research Chair, Matt Farrar, coming from the Mayo Clinic in Florida. We received 7 of the 11 Centers of Excellence in Commercialization of Research awarded in the first round, and we had the second largest cohort of Vanier Scholars, the new scholarships for graduate students. This is at UBC, primarily in Vancouver. I'm also proud of one very significant decision that was taken again after student leadership. A couple of years ago, medical students came to me and to others in the university and said that it was important that people in the global south have access to the innovation that comes out of UBC. And of course, they were often prevented from doing that depending on licensing agreements. And so we created a new initiative to make all of UBC's innovation accessible to people in the developing world. And we've gone one step further. Working with Harvard and Yale, we've developed principles and strategies for the equitable dissemination of medical technologies. Endorsed in January, this is a leadership role that UBC is taking in Canada and internationally, and I think it's an ethical statement about availability of the work that's done here for the public good globally. The Vancouver research strategy is almost finalized and will be disseminated shortly. There's been lots of consultation with the research community at UBC about the strategy. Community engagement, the third global theme for UBC. You'll remember, of course, that we were an Olympic venue. A wonderful legacy building resulted from that, the Doug Mitchell Thunderbird Sports Center. Also, of course, though, we had the opportunity to participate actively in the Cultural Olympiad, and I'll only mention one activity, and that was a fabulous opera and symposium on Louis Riel, the Harry Summers opera, and then a very, very interesting symposium drawing together Aboriginal leaders and others in our community to think about what is the Métis identity today and how does it relate to the aspirations of Métis people in our society. There was a major initiative announced in the 2010 throne speech of the provincial government, and that was to help UBC become a living laboratory, bringing together strategic partners and communities to solve major societal issues, to be a demonstration bed, not just of ecological sustainability, but of social and economic sustainability as well. There are spectacular initiatives taking place, and I'll say a little more about a couple of them later. The community engagement strategic planning process has started under Stephen Owen's leadership, and you're going to hear more about that this year. There are very interesting developments in relation to land use planning. You'll remember that the government introduced legislation in April to transfer control of land use planning for UBC's Vancouver campus from Metro Vancouver to the province of British Columbia and through the province to our Board of Governors. That was given royal assent, that bill, on June 3rd, and we're currently updating our land use plan to address key issues such as housing affordability and the continued health and development of the UBC farm. The board established key principles as we think through that land use strategy. And they said everything that we do when we think about land use has to flow from these principles. The first is that the primary goal is to promote the academic mission of UBC, that sustainability must be a key value in everything we do, housing affordability must be advanced more aggressively, completeness and functionality of the community, that relates to sustainability. Can we have a community where it's possible to live without driving for 10 kilometers to get milk or whatever? Creativity and flexibility, and then finally a strong governance model, which we'll be working on with the community over the course of the next 18 months or so. On August 18th, the Minister of Community and Rural Development issued an order specifying the process requirements for UBC to meet in any land use plan process, and we will, of course, abide by and exceed those requirements. The consultations began in July, and we will continue with open houses, workshops, e-consultations. There are 3 upcoming public events in October, and then a full-scale public hearing will take place late in November. Now, on the 6 other themes, I'll say a little bit less, but I want to emphasize the importance of these other themes in the strategic plan because I think they speak to the specificity of UBC, our place, and the promise that our place allows us to make and to deliver. Aboriginal engagement. In its 2nd year, the Aboriginal strategy is well underway, significant achievements already in 1.5 years. The Centre for Teaching and Learning Technology is working to develop more effective instructional approaches for working with Aboriginal students. Faculty hiring of Aboriginal Indigenous professors has increased. We have almost doubled over the last year and a half the number of Indigenous professors at UBC, and I want to single out the Faculty of Arts, which has made tremendous commitments in this area and really succeeded in hiring outstanding people. One of those people is Cheryl Lightfoot, political science professor, one of 6 Aboriginal scholars in North America in the area of comparative politics, who won the American Political Science Dissertation Award on Race, Ethnicity, and Politics. So we are attracting here outstanding Aboriginal Indigenous scholars because I think there's a sense of momentum and commitment. We can do better, and we will do better, and I'm meeting later this afternoon with my external Aboriginal Community Advisory Council, who's pushing us very hard to do better. On alumni engagement, we have over 250,000 graduates, as you know, and we are focusing very, very hard on deepening the relationship with our alumni community through volunteer programs, advocacy initiatives, and lifelong learning opportunities. I want to challenge all the alumni in the room today to tell us how we can do a better job connecting with you, and I encourage you to offer up your volunteer activities to your alma mater. There are new alumni affairs officers in the faculties. We now have more events, more points of contact, more social media interaction with our alumni than ever before in our history. I'm delighted to say the Alumni Association Board and the university work brilliantly together. It's such a great partnership, and in fact, I'm meeting with them immediately after this event. The board also this year approved a plan to build a new alumni center that's going to be located right next to the new Student Union building on University Square. I can't think of a more wonderful constellation than to have our alumni center and our student center right next door to each other, with the opportunities for sharing that provides. Because I think our students tell us and our alumni tell us that they want to have more opportunities to connect across that divide of generation, but not of interest. Now, this Alumni Center will be funded entirely by donations, and I am delighted to say that our Chancellor has agreed to serve as co-chair of the campaign for the Alumni Center. Intercultural understanding, another very important area, I believe, for UBC. It seems to me that today, a university like UBC in a place like Vancouver and in British Columbia more generally has an obligation to help ourselves and our students become more culturally fluid, more able to understand the backgrounds of people that we interact with on a daily basis. This isn't just about our international engagements, it's about what we feel right here in our own communities. If the old form of education was reading, writing, and arithmetic, I think it's the case that cultural fluidity is a new imperative for education today. Now, I have to say this is an area where I do not think we have made enough progress at UBC in the last number of years. I'm going to be making some announcements over the next month or so about how to drive this agenda more forcefully. However, there are some good elements in place. A renewed equity and diversity strategy and a plan for the future was approved for implementation. And once again, UBC was named one of Canada's best diversity employers, this for the third consecutive year. So there's much good work to build on, but I think much more to do, and this is an area where I am going to devote personally energies over the course of the next year. On international engagement, well, this is a remarkable story. UBC saw 14% of Vancouver students and 22% of Okanagan students having the opportunity to engage in international work as part of their undergraduate degree. Across Canada, the average is 3%, so we're doing very well, but again, I think we can do any better. I'd love to get to a third of all of our students having an international opportunity within the next 2 to 3 years. 25% of our graduate students are already international students, and this is a remarkable statistic. 46% of all UBC research is published jointly with colleagues outside Canada. That's a great testament to the collaborative networks of which my colleagues here at UBC are a part. Now, I do want to put a caveat on that. A lot of that has to do with relationships in the United States, and that's very, very positive, but I would like to see over the course of the next few years an even further broadening of those research relationships, especially to include colleagues in the developing world. We've also committed to an international strategy, which is being developed now, and I hope will be launched over the course of the next year. This is a hard thing to do at a university as diverse as UBC with so many different commitments, but we're making good progress in finding out what's happening across the university and trying to aggregate some of those initiatives so that we can make a strategic decision as to where we can really make a difference with our international engagements. On the outstanding work environment, of course, there are 9 collective agreements up for negotiation this year. The provincial government mandate for 0-0 in financial rewards over the next 2 years clearly creates a trial and difficulties in those negotiations, but I am pleased to say that the university and its professional group, APS, reached agreement over the summer on a 2-year package. The Faculty Association has given notice under its collective agreement to proceed to interest arbitration, and so that's in preparation now. I am delighted to tell you that earlier this month, a very long-standing issue with CUPE 116 was resolved. This was an issue over housing on the Vancouver campus and securing a place for CUPE 116 members in the operations and maintenance of student housing now and into the future. So this has now been concluded as an agreement. We know what the future holds, and I want to congratulate CUPE for securing a very promising future for its members. Childcare spaces increased by 108 in 2009, and the board has made a commitment to get to 1,000 spaces through a variety of options by 2015. That would be a doubling of where we were last year. I have to point out that UBC already runs the largest daycare facility set of operations of any university in North America already, and we're going to be growing that substantially, partly because of our location and partly because, I must say it, of a weak public policy framework that does not support childhood education, preschool and after school as it might. Recruitment, of course, remains a challenge at UBC in large measure, almost entirely because of housing costs. It seems to be the single greatest reason that people may choose not to come to UBC. And so we're working very hard to find new ways of addressing that housing affordability question by reorienting some of the future South Campus development. Sustainability. A structurally balanced budget, of course, was achieved this last year after incredible work across the university, and I want to thank all of my colleagues for that work. In Vancouver, a $32 million structural deficit was eliminated. That implied $19 million in central savings, administrative savings, through campus-wide IT licensing, administrative efficiencies, document management, and reducing some contingencies. $7 million in savings at the faculty level, but also, by the way, a $6 million increase in investment and in business revenues from some of our operations. I believe that UBC is today better positioned than any other university in Canada, and at the height of where we could be in North America to strengthen our programs and expand our influence. I think we have to seize the day. I do not exult in the misfortunes of others. There are some really tough situations that some of our sister institutions are facing across Canada and in the US particularly, and soon in the United Kingdom. But we are not in that position, and it's our moment to take advantage of our relative strength. I also want to point out that the government made a commitment in the last budget that it would explore the possibility of moving the universities, the 4 research-intensive universities, out of the government reporting entity. This is a very important discussion, and by no means has any decision been taken to do this. The goal here is to allow for greater flexibility for the universities for future borrowing. Our hope at UBC is that we could invest almost $400 million in self-funding debt that is actually covered by revenues in student housing and in savings from energy consumption. We would really like to aggressively move on this, and under the current debt circumstances of the provincial government, it's difficult. So we're looking at the opportunity of how we can move the university out of the reporting entity to free up that debt capacity. The point I want to emphasize is this in no way is an attempt to distance the university from public policy. In fact, quite the opposite. The goal is to drive the campus as a living lab, to see the university as a resource for the whole community, and to do it in a way that's financially and fiscally responsible. So these are exciting initiatives. I also, of course, want to emphasize that tremendous work was done this year in Vancouver to integrate the organizational structure for sustainability. We now have a university sustainability leader in John Robinson. we've brought together a team that encompasses academic, research, and operations, teaching, learning, research, and operations. And of course, this group will find a new home in the spectacular SIRS building that will open in 2011 and will be the most energy, not just efficient, but contributing building in North America. So that's an overview of where I think UBC is today, and a report back in a preliminary fashion on implementation of Place and Promise. I encourage you again to take a look at the website for more details, and we now have an opportunity to move to questions. Microphones are on either side of me, and I encourage you to use those mics and to identify who you are before asking a question. And I would ask that you try to make the questions relatively short so that other people who want to raise issues will have an opportunity to do so. While people are considering what they might like to ask, I was sent 2 questions by some of our terrific students, and I thought I would share those questions with you in a very brief response. The first was a question from Alyssa Hogg, who's a student assistant in the Terry Project. The idea here was that Place and Promise and lots of initiatives on campus outside the classroom seem to be promoting the idea of global citizenship and the importance of contributing to something bigger than ourselves. And the question is, how is the university going to emphasize those values in our classrooms? How can we as a university truly promote global values like international engagement and intercultural engagement if we're not giving students the opportunities to do within a classroom setting what they might do outside? It's a very complex question, and I can only answer very briefly. But I'd emphasize that the student experience is not something that I think can be divided fully as to classroom and non-classroom. For me, the student experience is all about the totality of the experience of being at UBC. And so it's not less important that things are happening outside the classroom. In fact, in some ways, sometimes it may be more important, and I certainly would want to support that. On the other hand, I think there is a pointed comment here to us as professors particularly, and that is, are we really helping our students in the classroom understand not just the technical subject matter that we want to convey, but sort of how that subject matter relates to the broader purposes they may have as human beings? I think that is an interesting question for us to reflect on as professors, and there are, of course, many initiatives. We have now one of the largest community-based research programs in Canada. Many scholars here at UBC are doing community-based research and engaging their students in those opportunities with Aboriginal communities, with communities across the province, Canada, and internationally. In addition, community service learning opportunities are being expanded across the university very aggressively. So I think we just have to keep down that track, keep looking at it with great intention, and helping our students see that their classroom experience and their other experiences are not disconnected. The other question was from Harry Piggott, and it's a big one. He said that in his English 112 course, they've been exploring ideas around the concept of a university education. They're probably reading Cardinal Newman, recently beatified. And he says, although I understand that the question might yield a very personal and subjective answer, I would like your response to the question, why are we here at the university? It's, of course, the right question. And I suppose all I can say is I think that that's a question that each one of us should be asking ourselves all the time. I think whether we're a staff member or a faculty member, a student, or an alumni volunteering, an alumnus volunteering with the university, why we're here is really the question that we should answer. For me, and I can only speak very personally, why I'm here goes back to my opening remarks, which is I think that universities are one of the only social institutions that has survived relatively intact since the medieval period that have the capacity to really change the future. And I can't think of a place that I would rather be than a university like UBC, which because of its scale, its scope, its ambition, and its clarity of purpose, I think can change the future of our community, can change the future of our Canadian society, and can contribute to the reshaping of the future of the entire world. And I don't say that lightly. We have that ability. There are so few places where one's work can have such value and such significance. And so for me, that's why we're in a university. Questions from the floor? Okay, I'm seeing a question about animal experimentation, and since no one's coming up, I'll read one of them and I'll try and answer it. Why does UBC experiment on cats? Cut open their backs, implant electrodes into their heads? That's a question. And the short answer to that is that UBC does not do that. There's reference to past work that was done by one of our researchers. That work is no longer being done, and it gives me the opportunity to say a few words about animal research at a major world university. It's important, I think, to understand that we only involve animals in research when there are no alternatives that exist. We make every effort to minimize the use of animals in research, but, and it's a hugely important but, at some point, the effectiveness of new drugs and new treatments must be evaluated in living organisms before those treatments or drugs can be approved for human trials. Our animal care program and facilities are fully accredited in a compulsory fashion by the Canadian Council for Animal Care, and I can tell you personally that I've dealt with the Canadian Council ever since I arrived at UBC. They are very serious in their supervision, and UBC has invested in the last 4 years almost $100 million to improve our animal care facilities to make sure that we are meeting the requirements of the Canadian Council on Animal Care. In addition, we are scrutinized by the BC SPCA. I also want to point out a couple of other things. In 2009-2010, less than 9% of UBC's total research funding came from industry sources, less than 9%. And of that total, the portion that came from pharmaceutical companies mostly funded tests on human subjects, not on animals. And I say that because I think there's some information in the wider society that's simply not correct. We are not highly dependent at most large research universities, and certainly not at UBC, on pharmaceutical company funded research. And that research is largely targeted at human trials. The last point I'll make on this question is that we have to understand that there's a very practical effect from drug research and other forms of research on animals. And that is that we actually do things that benefit the wider society. So for example, I'll give you one UBC example. The first successful drug for treating age-related macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of adult blindness, and which was ultimately produced by a UBC spin-off, restoring the sight of hundreds of thousands of people around the world, did result from some animal trials. There are many other such examples. This is not superficial. This is not people just deciding to play around. It's people who, after very rigorous ethical review, which is constantly supervised, make decisions about how they're going to test in ways that make new therapies, new treatments available for the wider population. Yes?
You briefly spoke about the desire to pursue a reorientation in the development of South Campus. Mm-hmm. We've seen a lot of market rate housing being built on South Campus. Can you speak more about that
Sure.
desire, and also are we going to see more student housing?
Yes. So we're clearly seeing more student housing, so I'll address that first, because I mentioned the Board of Governors has already approved 2,500 new student housing spaces over the course of the next 3 to 4 years. The first element of that is already under construction. at Place Vanier, and so we have, I think, 563 new beds, if I remember correctly, coming online next year. So that's happening, and that's a fundamental commitment. But that's a particular form of student housing, student residences. We're also interested in making sure that students, staff, and faculty who want to live on the university campus have that opportunity. I'm sure that you know that we've engaged in some fairly creative ways of doing that in the past. So, for example, for faculty and staff, we have done some co-development arrangements where the staff or faculty member actually becomes the developer of his or her own property. This cuts out all sorts of marketing costs, it cuts out developer profit, and it means that you can actually deliver at a very positive rate for faculty and staff. I imagine, well, I know that we will do more of those sorts of developments. But in addition, and this is perhaps really the key point, the sustainability imperatives for the university tell us that we have to do something to change the style of housing that's being produced on South Campus. We've been told that for a number of years by our independent urban advisory panel, but we've been constrained. You have to understand why this has happened. We were constrained by something called the Official Community Plan that told us directly how much could be built on the South Campus, what it would have to look like, what the floor plates would be, and the result was really a form of suburban development. I think that what most people who look at these issues seriously now have determined is that the idea of sort of spreading out the development as far as possible is not any longer a sustainable approach to housing. And so we're looking to change the density rules to allow for somewhat smaller units. Right now, the average unit has to be 2 or 3 bedrooms because of the existing rules. That doesn't make sense. We did a survey of our faculty and staff last year, and we discovered that a very high percentage of our faculty and staff lives either alone or with one other person. And they're looking for smaller units that are hence more affordable. So there are a whole number of pieces that have to be put in place. The central one for me is increasing the density on some parts of the campus to allow for smaller units that are more affordable and that are more sustainable, as long as that's matched with a very strong creation of open spaces, parkland, amenities, community centers, etc. And for me, that's going to be the future of the evolution of development on the UBC campus. Much more sustainable because of the densities, and much more attention paid to all of the community amenities. I want to be fair. There's some great work that's already been done. One of our South Campus developments just won a major international award for community planning. But in my view, the constraints under which we've been operating have not actually been conducive to greater sustainability and to allowing greater affordability. And that's the dynamic that we're trying to change, both for students and for faculty and staff. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Neil Janssen. I'm a graduate student. I have a question on something similar, which is the Gage South neighborhood.
Yes.
So as part of this land use plan, the consultation started with an ideas gathering fair. And a number of students, as well as the AMS, told Campus Community Planning that Gage South is something that we would like to talk about as part of these. Mm-hmm. In the documentation that went to the board, the borders for the South Campus neighborhood is changing, East Campus is changing, a new one at Acadia is being created, University Boulevard is changing, Thunderbird is disappearing, North Campus is also disappearing, and somehow Gage South made it onto that map unchanged. And I'm just wondering how we can have an honest, good faith discussion about Gage South neighborhood, because it doesn't seem to be on the radar of Campus Community Planning, and they don't seem to be willing to engage in discussion over whether this neighborhood is appropriately located.
Right. Thank you. So the short answer is that there will be an open discussion about the Gage neighborhood. So rest assured that it will be part of the overall discussion. There were some technical reasons that it wasn't included in the first submission to the board, but those are being sorted out, and I promise you that it will form part of our overall discussion. The central issue for me is we're all, as a community, going to have to find means to understand that when you have a community that is vitally a part of a living, working community, not just separated out from the surrounding environment. There are going to be some kind of interface that will at times be less than optimal. So I think what we have to do for Gage personally is figure out what makes most sense for its location in relation to student housing and all of the other things, and in relation to what developments will take place on University Boulevard, to make sure that it will be a happy and successful community for the people living there and for the people who are living next to it, mostly students. So all of that will be on the table. We have to figure out what the right balance is, but you know, we do have to resist. I mean, one of the great problems of any kind of community planning, and those of you who've worked, never mind in universities, but in municipalities know that you can very easily fall into what's called NIMBYism, the not in my backyard phenomenon. And there are lots of places where, you know, making choices will not be perfect from everyone's perspective, but I think we do have to find ways of living together as a community, and that's what we're going to have to figure out with Gage. But I do promise you, it's not off the table for discussion, and we are actually trying to think creatively about how best to do it in a way that will maximize the opportunity for good interaction between students and others who might be there. It might turn out, for example, that could focus primarily on graduate student housing, or it might focus primarily on housing for younger adults or single parent or single not family housing. So I mean, there are ways of doing it that I think could actually change the dynamic. Yes.
Hi, my name is Hugh Brown. I work at the Center for High Throughput Biology. You mentioned that UBC's Vancouver campus is no longer under the supervision of the City of Vancouver.
Well, it never was. It was the Metro Vancouver, the GVRD.
Sorry. Metro Vancouver. So when it comes to issues like planning, it would seem that UBC is the one making the plans and the one doing the supervision, and there's a lack of democratically elected officials that can be voted out if it comes to that. What provision is going to be made for such democratic options?
Great question. The first point is that even in the interim period, UBC is not judge and jury on its own, because all of the plans that will be produced after public consultation must actually be approved by the minister. So it's not just us deciding and then having a no say. And I can tell you that the minister's regulations so far have been very rigorous. They've said, you know, who has to be consulted, where does the consultation have to take place, what does the public hearing look like. So my sense is the minister is going to take his or her role, depending on who it is at the time, very, very seriously. So that's the first point. Second point is we're in an interim period, and the government was really clear on that. What we have now is a period before we get into the broader governance discussion. Currently, there are elected officials through the UNA, the University Neighborhoods Association. So there are people who represent the housing areas on campus currently. I don't know whether that will be a continued model or whether there will be a different model, but that's subject to a wide discussion over the course of the next couple of years, I would assume. There will be governance changes taking place. So what we're in now is this interim period, and we're committed, and the board has committed itself to really take a rigorous look at governance to ensure that democratic participation is possible.
Hello, I'm Jennifer Beverell. I'm an engineering undergrad student. I came here I did a year of post-secondary in Eastern Canada, and I want to know if you're aware that, particularly for students trying to get post-secondary from lesser-known institutions, that it's a real difficulty to get your credits fairly assessed and evaluated. It's a process that takes several months, and I think it really comes from just there's inefficiency between admissions, the corresponding faculties, and the faculty you want to get into. And when you don't meet the specific case, it's a lot of effort for them, so they're more likely to not have the time for you and brush you off when you're a student who's really just looking for credits for the things that you legitimately did. You want to just move on and be able to take the courses that you want to take.
Thank you. So I've certainly heard that before. You're not the first person to say it, and it does worry me, I have to be honest. it's hard to evaluate sometimes programs at other institutions. And of course, there are so many other institutions that exist that we don't have a template that can automatically be applied across the board. So a lot of situations are specific. I guess the part that worries me is your sense that perhaps you've been blown off and not taken seriously in this. That should never happen. And you know, to the extent that overburdened administrative people are perhaps not being provided with the support they need or the clarity that they need around making decisions, then we've got a problem. So I think you've pointed out something important. If I could ask if you can stay, we're going to end fairly soon. If you could stay afterwards, I want to put you in touch with someone who can maybe really do a little exploring on that for me. Thank you very much. I think last question right over here.
Hi, my name is Rugen Heng Zhang, and I am a new graduate student. I would just like to ask your opinion, given the current events during the past few weeks, what would be the future for the relationship between the university and the fraternities village, and how confident are we in dedicating land use for organizations that don't seem to be contributing positively to the campus? Thank you.
It's a fair question. So I guess I'd start by saying I was never a member of a fraternity, so I didn't experience the life of the fraternity, but I do talk to many people from UBC and elsewhere who did experience that life. And for many people, it is the place that they find their grounding and really their home in a very large institution. So I don't think I would join you in saying that the fraternities and sororities don't play an important role. I think for many people, on a huge campus, they are that place where the big is made small, and that's what we're looking for. And there are lots of different ways of doing that. There are, there's the Abdul Latta Science Center, there are clubs, there are activities, there are sports programs, there's theater, there's music. But for some people, there are fraternities and sororities. So I wouldn't, lightly treat them as unimportant. Having said that, clearly, what happened not this last weekend but the weekend before was very disturbing. And there seemed to be a lack of ability to manage a situation that was in many ways created by the desire of the fraternities to reach out to large groups of people to encourage them to become members. So at one level, as you point out, the university is renting, effectively leasing space to the fraternities. On the other hand, members of the fraternities are our students, so we can't absolve ourselves from responsibility. It's a combination that we now have to work on very, very forcefully. I know that the Vice President's students and other people in his portfolio have been working very hard to make sure that we are helping the fraternities talk to their neighbors, helping the fraternities to think about how they might plan in a different way so that these kinds of incidents are not repeated. The one thing I am sure about is we cannot let what happened at some sister universities happen here, where there was an out-of-control element that developed over a number of years so that the university becomes known as the drinking or the party school, and where, in some cases, whole activities had to be completely shut down. I don't want to get there, so we want to be active, aggressive on this quickly, working in partnership with the fraternities and indeed with our student government to make sure that responsible heads prevail and that we provide the help that the fraternities may need to do this properly. Well, I'm sorry that we can't go on all afternoon. I'm sure I would be delighted to do so, but others of you actually have work to do, I'm sure. I'd like to thank you very much for the questions and for your attention. If there are any issues that you weren't able to address, then please do send in questions, and I promise you you'll get an answer back. And I would again encourage you to look at Place and Promise and the report on the first few months of implementation. I also want to take this opportunity to welcome you later this fall to Celebrating Achievement, the UBC Blue and Gold Review, which is going to be held on November 29th at the Chan Center. For those of you who haven't attended, it's a moving experience because you get to see what your colleagues and our students are doing across the university, and it is spectacular. It's just a wonderful set of stories. It's not heavy, it's fun, and this year we get to also celebrate the achievement of our alumni at the same time. This whole event was videotaped and will be on the President's website, so if you feel that you need to look at it again, feel free, or encourage colleagues to take a look if you think it would be useful. Thank you all so much, and thank you for what you do for this wonderful institution for UBC. Thank you.